Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Kubernetes Office Hours. The Office Hours is where we answer your user questions live on air with our esteemed panel of experts. You can find us in the Office Hours channel on Slack, and remember to check the topic for the URL and more information. Before we begin, we're going to start with some introductions, and I'll learn to talk, I promise. I'm joined by my new co-host today, Carlos Santana. Welcome, Carlos. Do you want to say hello and tell us a little bit about you? All right, thank you. Let's just follow the squares round. Yes, it is. All right, thank you. Yogi?
Hey everyone, my name is Yogi. I'm based out of Singapore. I am a volunteer at this Kubernetes community. And yeah, I learned a lot from the community. So just here to return the favor, frankly. I work at a company called DB, and it's a distributed database. So yeah, there's a lot of Kubernetes in there as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Borko. I had a lot of value out of this when I was getting started in Kubernetes, so I'm really happy to be part of this initiative and help out those coming in the community and learning Kubernetes. Professionally, I got a new job a couple of weeks ago. I'm working as a software engineer for a startup called Render.com.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Eddie Zaneski. I help lead the SIG CLI special interest group, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I'm a developer advocate at Amazon Web Services, and I'm based out of Denver, Colorado in the US.
Awesome, thank you. Archie?
Hey, I'm late to the party, I think, but hey, my name is Archie. I'm from Montreal, Canada. I'm actually a CNCF ambassador and working at Google. I'm actually also teaching Kubernetes in universities now. So I'm happy to share my university skills with everyone. And yeah, I'm also organizing meetup in Canada for CNCF. If you are down in Canada, please join our meetups for Kubernetes and CNCF. Happy to be here.
All right, awesome. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so before we begin, there are some ground rules. This is a Kubernetes event, and as such, the code of conduct is in effect. That is the CNCF code of conduct. So please be excellent to each other. This is also a judgment-free zone. Everyone has to start from somewhere, so please help out your fellow buddy by providing and having a supportive environment in the channel. We will do our best to answer your questions, but we do not have access to your cluster, so live debugging is definitely off topic. But we will do our best to get you some guidance, advice, and anything we can to get you moving down into the next step. Normally, we provide shirts, however, the CNCF is still replenishing its inventory. We are going to chase this up, and we hope to be able to give out t-shirts very, very soon. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on your answers with your own experience and pro tips. And the audience, you can help us by pasting URLs to documentation, blogs, and anything else that may be relevant to what we're talking about. If you post your question onto discuss.kubernetes.io and you want us to tackle it on an episode of the office hours, you can drop the link into the office hours channel or send it to Carlos and I directly. We also do our best to find unanswered questions and discuss and bring them to us. You can also help us out by tweeting, spreading the word, and paying it forward. This panel is made up entirely of volunteers. If you want to join us and rotate in, again, reach out. We'd love to have new people come on and share their experience. That is enough with the ground rules. We're going to start a little bit different, and we're going to have an update on SIG CLI from Eddie. Hey, Eddie, you want to take it away?
Sure thing. Can you all see my screen?
It is now live on the stream, yes.
Awesome. So if you aren't familiar with the how the Kubernetes project is organized, the Kubernetes project is broken up into different special interest groups that own different parts of the code base and work on different aspects of the project. So we have a special interest group for networking. We have a SIG for the node. And there's a SIG for all of the command line tooling. And so this SIG is responsible for maintaining kube control, customize. We have a whole bunch of other sub-projects throughout here. The best way to get involved is to join us on our mailing list on Slack. And we have weekly meetings every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. This week, the meeting is a bug scrub for Customize, I believe. So if you have any interest in Customize and getting involved and maybe finding a good first issue to work on, you should absolutely join us for the bug scrub. It's super approachable. We walk through issue by issue and kind of talk through it. So it's a great time for newcomers to come and introduce themselves. We have a couple different leads for the SIG. So we have different chairs that kind of oversee SIG operations. So I'm joined by 3 awesome other folks from some other awesome companies. And we also have some a technical lead type role where they are in charge of project steering and establishing new sub-projects, really like serving as a technical lead. Handful of awesome emeritus leads that have since moved on to other awesome things in Kubernetes. And I think that's probably my favorite thing about the project is, if you work for a larger company, you can bounce between teams and, work on something completely different when you join a new org or team. And I feel like the Kubernetes project is the same way, where we have folks who are they start getting interested in storage one day and they can go work on the storage team. So if you have any interest in working with the CLI tools, you should absolutely come check us out. We have a handful of sub-projects that you may or may not have heard of directly before. A lot of these are libraries that all of the other CLI tools are based off of. So something like kube control or kubeadm, kind of like a shared CLI runtime that's used throughout the project. Along with the Crew, which is the package manager for kubectl plugins. We actually just spun up a new sub-project for KRM Functions. This is going to have a KRM registry. So KRM Functions are it's a specification for a function that you can write for Customize. That is basically a transform on your incoming and outcoming stream of Kubernetes resources. So you can write a quick function using a language that's standard in, standard out. And it's a specification for how you can mutate those resources, or maybe you want to add a annotation. So brand new sub-project. I think the first meeting just kicked off last week at the same time on Wednesday. So if you're interested in that, absolutely come check us out. And then one that's kind of near and dear to my heart, the awesome folks at IBM, Nick and his team started a project called Kui. If you haven't seen Kui before, it's a take on a hybrid interactive shell terminal type deal for kube control. So everything kind of gets parsed and shows you different links. You can kind of click through. If you say, show me the deployments, you can click through them on the right side here. Completely interactable with different components that you can write and customize. And this is a project I think got kicked off a bit ago, but it became an official SIG CLI sub-project in the last year when IBM donated it to the CNCF. So big shout out to them. Cool. So that's a quick overview of the SIG. Any questions on that before I dive into kind of our roadmap and what we're working on?
I had
yeah, just had
So, how'd you go, Archie?
Bash
No
skills is
questions so
enough.
far, but I queue a few for the end.
All right, let's go Archie, Chris, Carlos.
No, I'm just asking what type of skills you need to join, like Go, Bash, what type of languages people need to be familiar with joining
All the things. Absolutely all the things. I think, and this goes true for a lot of the Kubernetes sub-project, is there is just such a need for people to come in and triage open issues and help organize and prioritize work. And that was the first thing that I came into the project doing, was like, hey, we have like 600 open issues on KubeControl's GitHub. Like, is anyone going through these? Like, these are open for like 4 years at this point. And they're like, oh, we go through them every now and then. I'm like, okay, well, there's some from like 4 or 5 years ago that are still open. And so that's kind of the gap that I saw in the project, and what I jumped into doing was just kind of going through, triaging issues, finding duplicates. I didn't have any of the historical knowledge to answer a lot of them. And that's what we came together, and we created the bug scrubs to talk through those issues, to kind of knowledge transfer a lot of those historical decisions. So yeah, if you write Go, that's awesome. We always need people to write features and fix bugs, but there's tons of room for people to just come in and I can reproduce this issue that this user is having. That's one of the things that most users don't do when they're filling out an issue template, is they kind of skip through the brief reproducible case that we ask for in there. So if someone shows up and is like, here's how you can reproduce this easily, that is immensely helpful for the project. So yeah, people of all types of backgrounds and skills for sure.
Awesome. Chris?
Yeah, just hopefully a small question around the Krm functions. I've been going down a hole with kept as of late, and they have a similar kind of concept of a function. I was just wondering if those two are related, or are they separate streams, if you knew.
I'm not too familiar with kept. The Krm functions, I'll drop the kept links for them.
Yeah.
And this is, we really just kicked this off like last week. The kept is still open. I think we approved and merged it very recently.
Cool.
Yeah, there's tons of room. It's a brand new frontier for folks to jump into. If anyone has specific questions, you can drop those in the SIG CLI chat. I think there's actually a KRM Slack channel on the Kubernetes Slack now. But Katrina and Jeremy, the folks who are kind of running point on that, and yeah, they're super helpful too.
Yeah.
And
So I meant to say kept. So the KPT, not kept.
Yeah. No, okay. I got what you meant.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So cool. We're good. I'll thanks for the links. I'll go down that rabbit hole.
For sure.
And the Krm functions, I remember in KubeCon, there's a talk. So if somebody wants to know a little bit of details, there's a good presentation that was given in KubeCon that goes over what it means, and for people that do DevOps with Kubernetes, it covers. I'm very interested because it covers things that you can do on the client side, where this is not on the server side. And in some situations, platform teams or even vendors don't allow you to do certain things, and for risk, you're not allowed to do that in the server side. So this is like mutating on the client side that is done, and some people miss that point. So it's a CLI thing only. So I'm excited about that. We use customize a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah, again, sub-project is super new, so anyone is encouraged to come join, please.
Another question was, Chris mentioned the skills, right? Go. You mentioned KUI, KUI. I'm familiar with that because this is I think it's 2016 when I was working in OpenWhisk with Rick, Nick, me, myself, and others. We created OpenWhisk, which is like a functions as a service, a fast system, and KUI came out of that work of the user experience. So I was the lead for the user experience, and that has HTML code, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Node.js. So if you have those skills, you can contribute to KUI, right? And that's part of the SIG CLI. You don't have to be everything Go, and it's a hybrid, like I said. Though it's coming along a long way. Started from OpenWhisk, then Kubernetes. We did some work. So Nick is a great guy if you want to work with him.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick's team is awesome.
All right, thank you very much. Do you want to? I'll get your screen share back up, and we can do a quick overview of the roadmap. Is that right?
Yeah.
All right. Take it
So
away.
we have a couple caps open. These are our meeting notes. These are public. So we've talked through, and we recently just did our planning, which was right here. So this is our 124 planning. Again, I'll drop this in chat. This is linked a bunch of places. So this should be just a public document that anyone can check out. One of the big things we're working through is right now kube control is part of the main Kubernetes repo. So we do have a kube control repo by itself. We don't actually take pull requests there. We kind of just use it for issue tracking. All pull requests to the kubectl code has to be made to the main Kubernetes repo. We call that KK for short. And so there's been a multi-year initiative to move kubectl out of tree so we can build and release it and version it independently. So this is a massive undertaking that a lot of people have put some work into. We have been targeting 124 for it. I'm not quite sure if we'll make it. But yeah, that's the main idea is we want to be able to build kubectl independently and ship independent releases at some point. We haven't quite nailed down what a versioning schema would look like and how we maintain that compatibility. But yeah, that's one of the major goals that we've been doing. So we can get updates to people faster for those tools and bug fixes. Next thing we were talking about doing, making server-side apply the default. So this has gone back and forth a bit. I'm actually not sure if this one is going to make it right now. But if you're not familiar, we have another big effort that we've been doing over the past couple of years is trying to make the clients as dumb as possible. So we want to push all of the logic and all of the decision-making and diff calculating to the server. It just makes sense since that's where etcd is with all of the data. So we're trying to offload as much of the logic and decision-making from the clients as possible. So kube control apply, the server-side apply, diff, kube control diff on the server side, all of that we're trying to really push to the server side so the clients can just be a very thin client that wraps the API. Open API validations was another one. Right now we use the Swagger 2.0, the Open API schema, or whatever it's been renamed to now. We're trying to move from validations from V2 to V3. There's a lot of work from the working group for API expression. One of the big things that I have been working on, along with Mo over from SIG Auth, is we want to separate your kube control preferences in your user-specific configurations from your cluster-specific configurations, right? Because if you think about your actual kube config now, it is your credentials. It is your username, password, some kind of auth keys, some certs to talk to your cluster. And to merge those kube configs is pretty challenging and difficult. It's not easy to do. We have talked about doing a XDG specification type directory for kube configs, like a kubeconfig.d or something. The problem is any of those breaking changes are going to have a huge impact on the ecosystem, right? Because any tool that was built with an older version of client Go isn't going to know to look into a kubeconfig.d folder and merge all those kube configs. So we ultimately decided against pushing forward with that cap. We can always reopen if there's a ton of community interest, but yeah, it would have a really negative impact on the community tooling for tools that don't update to client Go. And so out of all this, we want to separate out the config and preferences. One of the opportunities we realized is since we're doing this, we can version out this kuberc as its own file, and we can introduce different changes to behaviors that we all agree are something that we would do differently, right? For example, if kube control delete is one of my babies that I've been working on, it is super easy for you to accidentally delete everything in your cluster, right? If you delete a namespace, it deletes everything in the namespace. If you delete all namespaces, it wipes your cluster. There's no confirmation. There's no hey, is this sure are you sure you want to do this? You're about to, RMRF root of your cluster. Do you want to do this? Yes or no? We haven't been able to introduce that because, again, it's a breaking change for any scripts or CI pipelines that are in progress. And maintaining backwards compatibility as long as possible is a staple of the project. And so this is hopefully a way that we can opt users into new behaviors and defaults. Mo has a couple that he wants to do for your kube config exec, your auth exec things, right? So your binaries that talk, you're like AWS IAM Authenticator, or your G-Cloud that's in your kube config that goes out and fetches credentials, right? Those like auth plugins. Right now, there's nothing to stop a rogue actor from sending you a kube config with a whatever binary they want embedded in that kube config. They can call any binary on your system. And so Mo wants to be able to allow list certain auth plugins inside of this kubectl file, right? So kube control can only ever call these binaries for authentication that you as a user has to allow list. So that's kind of just a handful of things. This one is like, there's a lot, and the more we talk about it, the more we realize that there's a lot here. I'm really hoping this is going to make 124. The KEP's not actually written yet. We're still in lots of conversations. But yeah, look out for this one and be ready to give feedback, please. Kube control delete, we can roll up into the top one there. Last couple, the exit codes here. If you haven't noticed, the exit codes are not standardized at all against kube control. I think if you do a regular diff, you're supposed to get back a 1 or a 0 if there's changes or not changes. There's different exit codes for different things in diff. Kube control doesn't follow any of those. I think kube control will just happily tell you that nothing was changed with the 0. I'm not quite sure of every single case, but this is probably the most common issue we get reported is like, why does this give me this exit code? It's like, well, that's the way it was built originally. If we could do it differently, we would. So that's what this KEP is for, is to kind of refactor all the exit codes in kube control and bring it in line with the like POSIX and Unix standard. I have a link for that. I'll pull that up. And then the last one, I'm not quite sure what the kube control metrics was. I don't know. I'm not going to take a guess what that was. I don't remember. I'm sorry. But I know that was a lot. Any questions or thoughts on that?
No, I think
That was an awesome overview. Thank you.
Yeah, this is very good.
Yeah, great updates
Cool.
there, and nice to see some of the things that's being worked on as well as some of the things that's delivered. I'm looking forward to trying out QA. I didn't know that existed. Carlos hadn't shared that with me, so for shame, Carlos. But it looks like a pretty cool tool, and I want to check that out.
I didn't know it was still alive. I have one question, Eddie. I think in the last Kubernetes contributor celebration, there was a presentation. Somebody was giving a presentation on kubectl, and people call it kube control at diversity, right? We're inclusive. It says they were mentioning that the SIG wants to take. I wasn't sure it was kubectl or the client go outside the KK repo, the Kubernetes main repo. Is that something still going on? You're looking for efforts? It's something that would take a while, right? To kind of like separate that. Is that one of the like big things ongoing?
So that would have been Mache. He's one of the leads and tech leads for SIG CLI and SIG apps for that matter. Mache is awesome if anyone doesn't know him. I'm not quite sure exactly what he talked about, but yeah, there has been. So if you haven't walked through the Kubernetes, am I still sharing my screen?
I can put it back up.
Yeah. So if you haven't seen the Kubernetes code base before, one of the big things in here is our staging folder. So if you come down to the source and look under staging, so these are all of the staging. We consider a package or a project.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One last note. You brought up the pronunciation. If you hadn't noticed, I have said it all of the possible ways while I speak. I do that on purpose to confuse people. Thank you.
Not a problem at all.
All right. Thank you for that. You're welcome to drop if you have somewhere else to be. And if you want to stay and answer some questions with us, then you're more than welcome to join us for that too. So, Carl.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie, for your time.
I'll hang out for sure. Please, if any of this interests you, come hang out with us, swing by our Slack channel or mailing us. We're looking for new contributors all the time.
Oh, and to plug something from Eddie, Eddie did a great talk on Raspberry Pis and embedded systems in KubeCon. So one of my top favorite talks of KubeCon have been that one. You did it with somebody else, but it was very, very, very good. Impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, that was Jeff Bilomek from Home Depot, actually. He's awesome.
Yes. And you, yep, very cool.
Nice. Carlos, do you want to take us away with question number 1?
Yeah, so we have question number 1. It's from discussions. There's a person asking, do I share my screen or how do we do this?
No, you can just read it out. That's all right.
Yeah. So the person is asking, is there any way better to inject an image to a cluster? It looks like for a local computer. So this is Minikube, a Minikube question. So the person is saying if there's a better way of doing, it looks like he has a script of like Minikube SSH, and that would SSH into the VM of Minikube, and then do inside that VM do a Docker pull, and then the image, and that will be stored in the Minikube. So he's saying that if there's a better way for that, and a lot of people have used the Docker Minikube Docker env. I've been using it a lot, and that will give you the environment variables to skip the Minikube SSH, and that will give you the variables that you can pass to your Docker CLI client to talk to the Docker daemon inside the VM over TCP, and then you can do Docker pull from there. The other way that I'll drop the link to the documentation is Minikube image. There used to be a Minikube cache, but that one is deprecated, like cache add. And these are images that if you use the VM, you don't destroy the VM, but create a new cluster. Every time you come up the cluster, the images are stored. But there's one called Minikube image, and image load will be the one that you can load something from a TGZ or an image, or you can do, you can also do image build, you can do image pull. And there's a little nice table in the doc at the top that says which are the supported runtimes, right? Like trial versus containerd, image build if you want to build the image, you don't want to build it. But I'll post the link, and that has at the top a nice table that says even performance, if the performance is good or okay. But yeah, instead of Minikube, you go into Minikube SSH, you can do it from outside, and Minikube image is a good CLI command for that. On top of the typical Docker env.
Is anyone familiar of a controller for seeding images, like for non-Minikube clusters? If I'm using EKS, GKE, AKS, or even bare metal, like, is there anything out there that will just pull down a bunch of images to all my nodes?
I have some code. It's from Matt Moore for Knative. It's a daemon set. Basically, we have in Knative, we have an API. We don't have implementation, but we have an API that says to lower the cold starts of images, like putting an image, and you can pre-seed the nodes you're saying. The little trick is you don't need a controller. You need a daemon set that basically runs something, pulls the image and complete it, right? And be done with that. So you can write a little controller that creates that daemon set and caches the images. So that from that building concept, you can build on top of that, right? The daemon set is something that runs on every image, and then you can run a little script that can just download the image. But it doesn't download the image and the script because the pod, it has the image. So you're running an image without running the command, right? So that's kind of a hacky / way of doing it.
Yeah, and Kind has that functionality too. I live
load.
inside Kind most of the days. Yeah, Kind has load as well.
Nice.
Yeah,
all right.
I dropped the links already, Carlos, but I think you might have a
thank
different
you.
one for Minikube.
Let's see. Pushing. This one is the pushing has at the top a nice little table that I really like.
All right, there. That's a pretty complete answer. So thank you for that, Carlos and others.
One tip of a Minikube that I think people don't realize. I think I have two. I'm a fan of Minikube. One is Minikube can have more than one node. A lot of people are like, oh my god, you can do Minikube dash nodes, 3 nodes, and you can have a Minikube of 3 nodes. You don't need to use kind. I use kind for that. And then the second tip is you can have Minikube dash no Kubernetes. So that's the one that I use for Docker desktop replacement. So it's a Minikube just with the VM, with Docker daemon inside, no Kubernetes running. So my laptop, doesn't have to run many gigs of memory and CPU.
All right, great tip. Well, I think that actually leads really nicely onto the next question, Carlos. So we got a question also from discuss.kubernetes.io from PlanetF1. And I just paraphrased this. But essentially, I feel like they're asking, what are my options to get a local Kubernetes on an M1 Mac? This is an ARM-based Mac computer. They've told us that they've considered Rancher Desktop, but they don't think it supports M1. They're considering Minikube, Kind, VirtualBox, Parallels. Like, what are the options these days? Anyone get any thoughts on that? Who's got an M1? Anyone?
I don't have an M1, but I'm
I have been struggling with that myself. Back in the day, like probably 5 years ago, I was messing around with Vagrant to actually get a proper Kubernetes cluster through kubeadm running. I have that project still around, but the problem is getting base images for Vagrant for M1 because things like VirtualBox won't work on M1. The only thing that I've tried UTM, that's a free hypervisor, but I've even tried Fusion. But the only thing that really works well on a M1 from a hypervisor perspective, if you are going to go that route, is Parallels. It does cost money. It's like almost 100 USD. But I mean, frankly, with the performance that it gives and the options, Windows, Mac, and Linux, it's worth it. And once you have that, and using Parallels and Vagrant together, you can actually build out the Kubernetes. That's like really from scratch. I saw in that thread somebody actually answered microK8s. That's also something that I've actually seen work quite well.
microK8s on a Mac? Really? I thought that was a Snap distribution. Maybe I'm wrong.
It's actually available. You can just brew install it.
There we go.
And that works on M1. So keep it on the M1. Those are like viable options for M1. So.
Yeah, they fixed it. It used to be a problem, but I think they fixed it just before the holiday season, I guess.
All right, lots of things to try and play with there. So good advice, thank you. Anyone want to add anything?
The other thing that worked well was Docker Desktop. If you enable the Kubernetes API on Docker Desktop, that actually works well. You can also try the Kind or the Minikube with the Docker driver, which is Docker Desktop driver. That works. But all of that basically puts you in that Docker Desktop arena, which some people are not very comfortable with, actually.
All right, thanks, Yogi. Carlos, you want to grab the next one?
Next one is a question by Mark. I have a deployment in which I process an API endpoint via the service node port resource. If I do a simple, where's this one from?
These are all from discuss.kubernetes. Yeah.
From discuss, not opening the link. I lost it. So it looks like they have an endpoint via service node port. If I do a simple curl on port 310, I can see everything. I can still, till this point, it works fine. Now, how can I restrict access to this API endpoint using Kubernetes resources so that only a particular user can query this and not everybody? So who wants to take that one?
I can try maybe.
An easy one. That should be an easy one.
I can take the first maybe hit.
Yeah, opening a node port, IP address on my Kubernetes cluster. How do I now avoid everyone from hitting that one?
Yeah, well, I would actually not recommend in general use Node port if possible. Like for production, it's a good way to play on your dev environment, maybe to just learn how Kubernetes works. But like if you're trying to restrict, I assume you're running this in production. And if you're running in production, I would look to use something like load balancer or maybe ingress resources that potentially more secure way of accessing your API endpoint. Obviously, if you're running not in the cloud, you have less options. Maybe if you're running on-prem, you probably can use something like Metal LB for the load balancer. You can install ingress controller like Nginx or Istio gateway, something like that, to enable you to do that. Now, even those features, I don't think they allow you to restrict access to that endpoint specifically, but you can actually put some kind of authorization rules, maybe kind of a password or something like that you can restrict. If you're running on cloud providers, there's like tons of different services around protecting the APIs. Like I don't know, I'm from Google, so I can give an example of Cloud Armor that you can restrict to this certain specific range of IP addresses. So it's really depends on what environment you're running your Kubernetes cluster, and depending on that, you might have different options to restrict access to your API endpoint.
I always like to go with the really crude option, which is just to bind the API to 127.0.0.1 and then add a second container with like Nginx and basic auth or something along those lines. And that also works really well, where you just need to put something simple in place of the API. So.
Yeah, in this case, I think the person is saying a user can query this. So when you talk about user, we're talking about authentication, right? You want to authenticate. Carlos can do it, but not David, right? For example. So in that case, you're talking about authenticating that user to make sure it's Carlos, not David. If he's talking about networking, then we go into like you actually want to have access, so VPC or private net, like who can access that IP address, like David said. So yeah, good question, and don't do it in a production cluster thinking that you will do it, close it down tomorrow in a few minutes, right? The second you open that port in a public IP address from AWS, IBM Cloud, any cloud provider, there's people snooping all those IP addresses. So you will see traffic right away.
100%, definitely. All right, and our last question for today comes from Sagittarius A. Black, also from Kubernetes discussion boards. I have a Kubernetes test set up with 4 nodes and 1 control plane and VMs running on a Linux host. I know where the node port gets allocated on the nodes, but don't understand where the input of the ingress is on these VMs. Is it on the control plane or the host for the VMs? So basically, I can set up the ingress on Kubernetes, but I can't find the entrance on which object or host binds the ingress port. So does anyone here want to take a quick shot at describing how ingress controllers work on Kubernetes? Yogi, go for it, man.
Yeah, so typically an ingress controller would have a set of pods, a service associated with it. Some of them actually use host ports. The service might end up using host port, or the pods might end up using host ports. That is one option. The other one is they may actually choose to use a load balancer option. So if you're running in a cloud provider on AWS, an ELB, on GCP, there's a load balancer. So when you create a service of type load balancer, there is a corresponding load balancer getting created in your cloud environment. Now, I'm assuming based on the question that this is not on a cloud and you're running it in your own sort of environment. And you have some API-based load balancers that you could use. You could use Metal LB in that scenario. Let's say you don't want to invest time in Metal LB. Most likely, your ingress controller would be creating a service that would be binding to a node port. You can customize or fix that node port. You can say, I want a fixed node port on port. Maybe take the first one, or take like, normally I end up taking 31,000 port number for say HTTP and 31,443 for HTTPS. So any resource, any ingress resource that you associate with it would actually be accessible on that port. If it is HTTP that you want to access, then you go for the HTTP port. If you want to access the TLS version, you go for the TLS port. So net, there is a service. If it is of type load balancer, it would create a load balancer if one is there. If it is of type node port, then it will be every port on every worker node there. So that would be your ingress point.
One of the things that you can always check is if you do kube control get endpoints, that is a namespace scoped resource. So you can put a -A on there, and that'll show you all the endpoints that are registered on your cluster. So it'll show you all your IP addresses, and especially if you have any node ports or anything public, it should show up in your endpoints list.
Yeah, you should also be able to describe the ingress that you created, and it should give you the endpoint there. So if you're looking for it.
I think that also the person was confused on like if this ingress runs on the control plane, right? So usually the ingress is something that is another workload in your in the cluster, like any other workload. So it will be a daemon set or and sometimes they're bound to port 80 and 443, which are those like ports that are not should not be used for anything else, and you're giving permissions to bind to those ports, but the ingress will be located in your worker nodes, not control planes. And like somebody said, you can do a kubectl -o wide, and that will give you the node name where that is located. So if you have the Nginx ingress controller or something, you can do a kubectl get pods -A -o wide, and that will give you like all the pods, and then grep for Nginx or ingress, and you will be able to find them. But yeah, that's good answers, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone very much, and great timing because I just got a text saying I have to go pick up my kid. So we will say goodbye and thank you. Now let's see let's see if I can get all the companies right. I'm really bad at this, but I want to thank IBM, Google, Yugabyte DB, Borco Enterprises, Amazon, and Google again. There we go. Right? Did I get that right? I did. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you all. So this is all volunteers. Your companies are supporting your time here. We really appreciate it. If anyone wants to join us in future episodes, please get in touch. Lastly, feel free to hang out in the Office Hours channel afterwards. Continue to ask your questions. We know this is January. You're probably all still on holiday, but we want to get more questions. We want to be able to help you out. So please join us next month, and we'll be back then. So have a wonderful day, everyone, and I'll speak to you all soon. Thanks again. Bye all.
Happy New Year.
So much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.